The snow fell harder than Marcus had seen all winter as he pulled his rusty Honda Civic into the parking lot of the 24-hour laundromat on Maple Street. His 8-year-old daughter Emma was fast asleep in the back seat, clutching her worn stuffed elephant. It was 11:47 p.m. And this wasn't exactly how he'd planned to spend their Saturday night. When your washing machine breaks and you're down to your last clean shirt from Monday's job interview, desperation makes the schedule. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. As Marcus gathered their laundry basket and gently shook Emma, awake, he noticed a figure huddled against the brick wall beside the laundromat's entrance. Even through the swirling snow, he could see it was a woman, thin and shivering, wearing what looked like an expensive coat that had seen better days. Her dark hair was damp from the snow, and she was curled up so small she almost disappeared into the shadows. What Marcus didn't know was that the woman he was about to meet would change both their lives forever, because sometimes the most extraordinary encounters happen in the most ordinary places, and sometimes the people who need saving aren't always the ones you'd expect. Marcus had always been the type of person who noticed things others missed. Maybe it came from being a single father. You develop eyes in the back of your head when you're responsible for another human being. Or maybe it was just who he was, the kind of guy who picked up dropped wallets and returned them, who held doors open, who remembered his elderly neighbor Mrs. Patterson's birthday every year. So when he saw the woman shivering outside the laundromat, his first instinct wasn't to look away or hurry inside. His first instinct was to help. "Emma, sweetheart, wake up," he said gently, unbuckling her seatbelt. "We're going to do our laundry now." Emma stirred, her sleepy eyes taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. "Why are we here so late, Daddy?" "Because this is when adventures happen," Marcus said with a smile, though inside he felt the familiar pang of guilt. He'd tried to fix the washing machine himself that afternoon, watching YouTube videos and following along with his limited toolbox. But after 3 hours of effort and Emma growing increasingly bored, he'd had to admit defeat. The repair would have to wait until he could afford a professional, which meant their clothes would have to wait until he could afford the laundromat. As they approached the entrance, Marcus slowed his pace. The woman hadn't moved, and he could see her shoulders shaking. She looked to be in her early 30s, with delicate features and hands that seemed too soft for someone living on the streets. Something about her didn't quite fit the picture of homelessness he'd formed in his mind. But he'd learned not to make assumptions about people's circumstances. "Excuse me," he said softly, not wanting to startle her. "Are you okay?" The woman looked up, and Marcus was struck by her eyes. They were a deep green, intelligent, and alert, but filled with something he recognized all too well. Fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from immediate danger, but the deeper fear that comes from being completely alone in the world. "I'm fine," she said quickly, her voice hoarse from the cold. "Just waiting for someone." Marcus glanced around the empty parking lot, then back at her. The snow was coming down harder now, and the temperature was dropping fast. The weather report had called for a blizzard, and from the looks of it, they were right on schedule. "There's a storm coming," he said gently. "Would you like to wait inside? The laundromat is warm, and I could use the company while I do our washing." The woman hesitated, and Marcus could see her weighing her options. She looked like she wanted to say yes, but something was holding her back. "I don't have any money," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's okay," Marcus replied. "You don't need money to sit inside where it's warm." Emma tugged on his coat. "Daddy, is the lady cold?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, then back at the woman. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think she is." Without hesitation, Emma began unwrapping the small blanket she'd brought from the car, a soft, pink throw that had been her security blanket for years. She walked over to the woman and held it out. "Here," Emma said simply. "This will help you not be cold." The woman stared at the blanket, then at Emma, and for a moment Marcus thought she might cry. When she looked back up at him, there was something different in her expression, a crack in the wall she'd built around herself. "What's your name?" she asked Emma.
"It."
"What's yours?" The woman paused, as if she'd forgotten for a moment. "I'm Sarah." Marcus extended his hand. "I'm Marcus. And I meant what I said about waiting inside." It's going to be a long night to do laundry anyway. Sarah took the blanket from Emma and wrapped it around her shoulders. The gesture seemed to break something loose inside her, and she nodded. "You," she said, and Marcus could hear the genuine gratitude in her voice. Inside the laundromat, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in harsh, white light. It wasn't exactly cozy, but it was warm and dry, and that was enough. Marcus fed quarters into 2 washing machines while Emma explored the rows of plastic chairs. Finally settling on one near the window where she could watch the snow fall, Sarah had chosen a chair in the corner, still wrapped in Emma's blanket. She watched them with curious eyes, as if she were studying a foreign species. Marcus wondered, when was the last time she'd been around a family, around normal people living normal lives? "How old are you, Emma?" Dara asked, as Marcus started sorting their clothes. 8 3/4, Emma replied seriously. "How old are you?" 32, Sarah said, and something about the way she said it made Marcus think she felt much older. "Do you have kids?" Emma asked, with the directness that only children possess. Sarah was quiet for a long moment.
"No,"
she said finally. "I don't." "That's okay, Emma," said matter-of-factly. "Not everyone has kids. But if you did have kids, you'd probably be a good mom. You have kind eyes." Marcus glanced over at Sarah and saw her blink rapidly, as if fighting back tears. He wondered what Emma saw that made her so sure. What quality in Sarah's eyes spoke to his daughter's 8-year-old intuition? As the washing machines filled with water and began their cycles, Marcus settled into a chair across from Sarah. Laundromat was quiet, except for the sound of the machines and the wind whistling outside. It felt almost peaceful, like they were in their own little bubble while the storm raged around them. "Do you live around here?" Marcus asked, trying to make conversation without being intrusive. Sarah shook her head. "I'm just passing through. Where are you headed?" "I don't know yet," she said. And there was something in her voice that suggested she really didn't know, that she was as lost as a person could be. Marcus recognized that feeling. He'd been there himself, after Emma's mother had left them 3 years ago. One day he'd been a married man with a steady job and a clear path forward. And the next day, he'd been a single father, trying to figure out how to raise a daughter on his own, while working 2 jobs to make ends meet. Sometimes not knowing where. "Your going is the beginning of an adventure," he said. It's echoing what he'd told Emma earlier. Sarah looked at him with those intelligent green eyes. "You don't strike me as the type of person who doesn't know where he's going." Marcus laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. You'd be surprised. 3 years ago, I had everything figured out. Wife, house, career plan. Then one day I came home and found a note on the kitchen table saying she couldn't do it anymore. The marriage, the responsibility, any of it. She was gone, and suddenly I was a single dad with a 5-year-old and no idea what I was doing. "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "Quietly, don't be, Emma and I. We're doing okay. Better than okay, actually. We're a team now." He looked over at his daughter, who was drawing pictures in the condensation on the window. Some of the best things in life come from the times when you have no idea what you're doing. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing this. "You do for work?" "I'm a graphic designer. Freelance, mostly. I used to work for a big advertising firm, but after Emma's mom left, I needed more flexibility. The pay isn't as steady, but I can work from home, be there when Emma gets off the school bus, help with homework. It's worth it." "That sounds nice," Sarah said, and there was a wistfulness in her voice that made Marcus think she was imagining what that kind of life might feel like. "What about you? What kind of work do you do?" Sarah hesitated again, that same pause he'd noticed when Emma asked her name. "I used to work in business, corporate stuff. It's complicated." Marcus sensed there was more to the story, but he didn't push. Everyone had their reasons for keeping certain parts of their lives private. He respected that. Emma had finished her window art and was now investigating the vending machines that lined one wall of the laundromat. "Daddy, can I have a snack?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Marcus checked his wallet and found he had enough quarters for 1 small bag of chips. He was trying to stretch their grocery budget until his next freelance payment came through. But Emma had been patient all day, and she deserved a treat. "One bag," he said, handing her the coins. Emma selected a bag of pretzels, and then, to Marcus's surprise, fed more quarters into the machine for a second bag. Before he could ask what she was doing, she walked over to Sarah and held out the second bag. "I thought you might be hungry too," Emma said simply. Sarah stared at the bag of pretzels as if it were made of gold. When she looked up at Emma, her eyes were definitely wet with tears this time. "Thank you," she whispered, accepting the snack. "You're very kind." "My daddy says kindness is the most important thing," Emma said, settling back into her chair. "More important than being smart or pretty or rich?" "Your daddy is a wise man," Sarah said, glancing at Marcus. Marcus felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with the heated laundromat. These were the moments that made all the struggles worth it, watching his daughter extend natural compassion to someone who needed it. Seeing her embody the values he'd tried so hard to instill in her, the washing machine switched to their rinse cycle, and the sound changed from the aggressive churning of the wash to the gentler swishing of the rinse. Outside, the snow continued to fall, and Marcus could see that several inches had already accumulated. The parking lot was turning into a white blanket, and the roads were becoming increasingly treacherous. "Looks like we might be here for a while," he said, nodding toward the window. Sarah followed his gaze and seemed to shrink further into Emma's blanket. "I should probably go," she said, but she made no move to get up. "Go where?" Emma asked with typical childhood directness. "There's a big storm. You'll get lost." "Emma's right," Marcus said gently. "It's not safe to be outside right now. The roads are probably getting bad, and visibility is almost zero." Sarah looked conflicted, as if she were weighing competing priorities in her mind. Marcus wondered what she was running from, what had led her to be sitting alone outside a laundromat on a snowy Saturday night. There was clearly more to her story than she was letting on. "I don't want to impose," she said finally. "You're not imposing," Marcus assured her. "If anything, you're helping us. It's nice to have someone to talk to while we wait for the laundry to finish." It was true. Despite the unusual circumstances, Marcus found himself enjoying Sarah's company. There was something about her that intrigued him, an intelligence in her eyes, thoughtfulness in the way she spoke, a gentleness in how she interacted with Emma. She seemed like someone who had once been very different from the person sitting in this laundromat, someone who had fallen on hard times but hadn't lost her essential humanity. The washing machines moved into their final spin cycle. Emma dozed off in her chair, the excitement of the late-night adventure finally catching up with her. Marcus got up quietly and moved their clothes to the dryers, feeding more quarters into the machines. When he sat back down, Sarah was watching Emma sleep. "She's beautiful," Sarah said softly. "She's everything to me," Marcus replied. "After her mother left, I thought I'd ruined her life. Thought she'd be damaged by growing up with just one parent, by all the struggles we've had. But look at her. She's kind, she's confident, she's happy. Sometimes I think she's teaching me more than I'm teaching her." "Children are resilient," Sarah said, "more resilient than adults, usually." "Were you resilient as a child?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely audible. "I thought I was. I thought I could handle anything. But sometimes life throws you things that you're not prepared for, and you realize that all the resilience in the world can't protect you from certain kinds of pain." Marcus studied her profile in the harsh fluorescent light. There was a story there, a painful one, and he found himself wanting to know more. But he also sensed that pushing too hard would cause her to retreat back into her shell. "Pain has a way of changing us," he said instead. "Sometimes for the better, sometimes not. The trick is figuring out how to carry it without letting it define you." Sarah turned to look at him, and for a moment her guard was completely down. In that moment, Marcus saw not the homeless woman who had been shivering outside, but someone else entirely, someone who had once been powerful, successful, maybe even wealthy. Someone who had lost everything and was trying to figure out how to rebuild from the ground up. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you keep going when everything falls apart?" Marcus looked at his sleeping daughter, then back at Sarah. Find something worth fighting for. For me, it's Emma. For you, it might be something else. But there's always something, even when it doesn't feel like it. The dryers finished their cycles with loud buzzing sounds that woke Emma up. She rubbed her eyes and looked around, momentarily confused about where she was. Then she saw Sarah still wrapped in her blanket and smiled. "Are you warmer now?" Emma asked. "Much warmer," Sarah said. "Thank you for the blanket, and for the pretzels, and for letting me stay inside with you." "That's what friends do," Emma said. Matter dash of dash factly, as Marcus folded their clean clothes and packed them back into the laundry basket. He realized that the storm outside had intensified. The wind was howling now, and the snow was falling so heavily that he could barely see his car in the parking lot. "I don't think we're going anywhere tonight," he said, looking out the window. Sarah stood up, still clutching Emma's blanket. "I should try to find somewhere else to go. You've done enough for me already." "Where are you going to go?" Emma asked. "Everything's closed and it's really scary outside." Marcus looked at Sarah, then at his daughter, then back at Sarah. He was about to make a decision that his practical side told him was foolish, but his heart told him was right. "Come home with us," he said. Sarah stared at Marcus as if he'd spoken in a foreign language. The offer hung in the air between them while the wind rattled the laundromat's windows and the fluorescent lights hummed overhead. "I can't," she said, finally shaking her head. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Marcus replied, hefting the laundry basket onto his hip. "I know you're kind to my daughter. I know you're alone in a blizzard. I know you need somewhere safe to spend the night." Emma piped up from beside him. "Our couch is really comfortable. And we have hot chocolate." Sarah's composure cracked slightly. At Emma's innocent offer, she pressed her lips together and looked toward the window where the storm had transformed the world outside into a swirling wall of white. "I don't want to bring my problems into your home," she said quietly. "Everyone has problems," Marcus said. "The question is whether you face them alone or with people who care." The word care seemed to hit Sarah unexpectedly. She blinked several times, and Marcus wondered when was the last time someone had genuinely cared about her well-being without wanting something in return. "Just for tonight," he added gently, "until the storm passes." Sarah looked down at Emma's blanket still wrapped around her shoulders, then at Emma herself, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. Finally, she nodded. "Just for tonight," she agreed. The drive to Marcus's apartment was treacherous. Snow had accumulated quickly, and even with snow tires, the Honda slipped and slid on the unplowed streets. Sarah sat in the passenger seat clutching the door handle, while Emma chatted from the back about all the things she wanted to show their guest. "We have a fish named Mr. Bubbles," Emma announced, "and my daddy makes really good pancakes." "Do you like pancakes?" "I used to," Sarah said, then seemed surprised by her own answer. Marcus glanced over at her. "Used to? I haven't had homemade pancakes in a very long time," she explained. "I'd forgotten that I liked them." There was something deeply sad about that statement, and Marcus found himself wondering what kind of life Sarah had been living. That homemade pancakes had become a forgotten pleasure. Their apartment was on the second floor of a converted Victorian house in a working-class neighborhood. It wasn't fancy, but Marcus had worked hard to make it feel like home. The walls were painted in warm colors, and Emma's artwork was displayed proudly throughout. Books lined makeshift shelves, and plants crowded the windowsills. "It's not much," Marcus said as they climbed the stairs, "but it's ours." When they entered the apartment, Sarah stopped just inside the doorway and looked around with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. It was as if she were seeing something she'd never encountered before. "It's beautiful," she said, and her voice held a note of wonder. Marcus looked around, trying to see the space through her eyes. The furniture was mostly secondhand, the carpet was worn in places, and the kitchen appliances had seen better days. But the apartment was clean and warm, and every corner spoke of the life he and Emma had built together. "Really?" he asked. "Eh?" "It feels like a home," Sarah said simply, and something in her tone suggested she knew the difference between a house and a home all too well. Emma immediately launched into tour guide mode, showing Sarah around the small apartment with pride. The living room with its mismatched but comfortable furniture, the kitchen where Daddy made the best grilled cheese sandwiches in the world, Her bedroom with its collection of stuffed animals and drawings taped to the walls. "Ah, and this is Daddy's room," Emma said, pointing down the hallway. "But don't worry, you can sleep on the couch. It folds out into a bed, and it's really bouncy." Sarah knelt down to Emma's level. "Are you sure it's okay if I stay? I don't want to take up too much space." "We have lots of space," Emma assured her. "And besides, sleepovers are fun." Marcus busied himself making hot chocolate while Emma continued her enthusiastic hosting. He used real cocoa powder and milk, not the instant packets, and added a tiny bit of vanilla the way his own mother had taught him years ago. As he stirred the mixture over the stove, he listened to Emma telling Sarah about her school, her friends, her favorite books. What struck him was how intently Sarah listened. She wasn't just being polite. She seemed genuinely fascinated by the details of Emma's ordinary 8-year-old life. She asked thoughtful questions about Emma's teachers, her favorite subjects, the games she liked to play at recess. "Here we go," Marcus said, carrying 3 mugs into the living room. Hot chocolate, as promised. Sarah accepted her mug with both hands and inhaled the steam rising from the surface. "This smells incredible. Daddy makes everything from scratch," Emma said proudly. "Even birthday cakes." "Your birthday's coming up, isn't it?" Marcus said, settling into his favorite armchair. 3 weeks, Emma announced. "I'm going to be 9, which is almost double digits." "That's a very important birthday," Sarah said seriously. "What are you hoping for?" Emma launched into an enthusiastic description of her birthday wishes, which ranged from the practical new art supplies to the fantastical a pet dragon. Sarah listened with the same focused attention she'd shown earlier, occasionally asking follow-up questions or making encouraging sounds. Marcus found himself studying Sarah as she interacted with his daughter. It was something almost hungry. In the way she absorbed every detail of their domestic life, as if she were trying to memorize what normal looked like. Her clothes, now that he could see them clearly in good light, were expensive but worn. Her shoes were designer but scuffed. Everything about her suggested someone who had once lived very differently. "What about you?" Emma asked Sarah. "When's your birthday?" Sarah paused with her mug halfway to her lips. "December 3rd. That's soon, too. Are you going to have a party?" The question seemed to catch Sarah off guard. I don't think so. Why not? Everyone should have a birthday party." "Not everyone has people to celebrate with," Sarah said. Quietly, Emma considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. "Well, you could celebrate with us. We're really good at parties." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, and she quickly took a sip of hot chocolate to hide her reaction. But Marcus caught it, and his heart ached for whatever circumstances had left this woman so alone that the offer of a birthday celebration from an 8-year-old could move her to tears. "That's a wonderful idea, Emma," he said gently. "Everyone deserves to have their birthday celebrated." As the evening wore on, Sarah gradually began to relax. The hot chocolate warmed her from the inside, and the apartment's cozy atmosphere seemed to chip away at the walls she'd built around herself. She told them about a stray cat she'd been feeding behind a diner in the last town she'd passed through, and about a beautiful sunset she'd seen from a bus station in Ohio. Her stories were carefully edited, Marcus noticed. She mentioned places and experiences, but never people, never relationships, never anything that might reveal too much about her past or her circumstances. It was the kind of careful conversation someone develops when they've learned that sharing too much can be dangerous. Emma, meanwhile, had no such filters. She told Sarah about her best friend Jessica, about the boy in her class who pulled her hair because he liked her, about the time she tried to give Mr. Bubbles a bath and flooded the bathroom. Her stories were full of small details and honest emotions, and Sarah seemed to treasure every one. "You're very good with her," Marcus said, during a moment when Emma had gone to brush her teeth. "She's easy to be good with," Sarah replied. "She's wonderful. You've raised an amazing daughter. Most days I feel like I'm just trying not to mess her up too badly." Sarah turned to look at him directly. "You're not messing her up. She's confident, kind, and curious about the world. She feels safe enough to be herself completely. That doesn't happen by accident." The compliment hit Marcus harder than he'd expected. He'd spent the last 3 years second-guessing every parenting decision, wondering if Emma would be better off with two parents, worrying that his struggles to make ends meet were somehow damaging her. "Thank you," he said. "That means more than you know." Emma emerged from the bathroom in her pajamas, carrying her toothbrush and a spare one still in its package. "I brought you a toothbrush," she announced to Sarah. "It's purple, which is my second favorite color after pink." Sarah accepted the toothbrush as if it were a precious gift. "Purple is actually my favorite color too." "Really, that's so cool. We have the same favorite color." The connection seemed to delight Emma, and she chattered excitedly about all the purple things in her room while Marcus set up the sofa bed. He found clean sheets and a spare blanket, creating a comfortable sleeping space in the living room. "Are you sure this is okay?" Sarah asked as he fluffed the pillows. "I feel like I'm taking advantage of your kindness." "You're not taking advantage of anything," Marcus assured her. "You're accepting help when you need it. There's a difference." Right. Sarah sat on the edge of the sofa bed and tested its softness. "It's been a while since I slept somewhere this comfortable." The admission slipped out before she could stop it. Marcus saw her immediately regret sharing even that small detail about her circumstances. "Well, you're safe here," he said simply. "Get some rest." Emma appeared at his side, already drowsy from the long day. "Good night, Sarah. Sweet dreams." "Good night, Emma. Thank you for sharing your blanket with me and your toothbrush." "And your daddy." Emma giggled at that last part and gave Sarah an impulsive hug before following Marcus down the hallway to her bedroom. As Marcus tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at him with serious eyes. "I like Sarah," she announced. "I can tell. You were very kind to her tonight. She seems sad, though, like she's carrying something heavy inside." Marcus was constantly amazed by his daughter's emotional intelligence. At 8 years old, she could read people with an accuracy that many adults never developed. "Some people carry sad things," he agreed. "Sometimes having friends can help make the load lighter." "Are we going to be Sarah's friends?" "I think we already are." Emma smiled and snuggled deeper into her covers. "Good. Everyone needs friends." After Emma fell asleep, Marcus returned to the living room to turn off the lights. Sarah was lying on the sofa bed, staring at the ceiling. She'd changed into a clean t-shirt he'd given her, one of his old college shirts that was too big for her. "Her slight frame? Can't sleep?" he asked quietly. "I keep waiting for something to go wrong," she admitted. "This much kindness from strangers, ... It doesn't usually come without a price." Marcus settled into his armchair, not ready to leave her alone with her worried thoughts. "What kind of price are you expecting?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. That's what makes it scary." "Has your experience with people been that bad?" "My experience with people has been ... complicated." She turned on her side to face him. "I haven't met many people like you and Emma. We're not that unusual. Most people are basically good. Think they just get caught up in their own lives and forget to look out for each other." "Maybe," Sarah said, but she didn't sound convinced. Marcus studied her in the dim light filtering in from the street lamps outside, even relaxed and wearing his old t-shirt. There was something about her that didn't quite fit with the homeless narrative. Her posture, the way she spoke, the unconscious elegance in her movements, all of it suggested someone who had been accustomed to a very different kind of life. "Can I ask you something?" he said carefully. "And you don't have to answer if you don't want to." Sarah tensed slightly. "Okay, what happened to you? How did you end up ... here?" Sarah was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she wasn't going to answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I made some mistakes. Trusted the wrong people. Lost everything that mattered." She paused. "Actually, that's not entirely true. I lost everything I thought mattered. It turns out most of it wasn't really important at all. But you're still here, still fighting. Some days I'm not sure why." Marcus leaned forward in his chair. "Because giving up isn't really an option. It's not when there's still good in the world. Not when there are still people like Emma who believe in birthday parties for everyone." Sarah's laugh was soft but genuine. "Your daughter is pretty persuasive. She gets that from her mother," Marcus said, then immediately regretted bringing up Emma's mother. It was still a painful subject, even after 3 years. "Do you miss her, Emma's mother?" Marcus considered the question carefully. I miss the family I thought we were going to be. I miss the certainty of having someone to share the parenting with. But her, the woman who could walk away from Emma without looking back? I don't miss her at all. Emma seems like she's thriving despite everything. Emma's stronger than both her parents combined, Marcus said with pride. She's going to be fine, no matter what life throws at her. You're a good father, Marcus. I hope you know that. The sincerity in her voice caught him off guard. I'm trying. To be? That's all any of us can do. Try to be better than we were yesterday. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the wind outside and the quiet sounds of the apartment settling around them. Marcus found himself reluctant to leave Sarah alone, though he couldn't quite explain why. There was something fragile about her, despite her obvious intelligence and strength. Something that made him want to stand guard against whatever demons were chasing her. I should let you get some sleep, he said finally, Marcus. Sarah's voice stopped him as he started to get up. Yeah, thank you. For tonight, for taking a chance on a stranger. I haven't felt this safe in a very long time. You are safe here, he said firmly. Whatever you're running from, it can't touch you here.
Ass.
Marcus made his way to his own bedroom. He wondered if that promise was one he could actually keep. Because while he meant every word of it, he had the distinct feeling that Sarah's problems were bigger and more complicated than a night's shelter could solve. Still, everyone deserves one night of peace, one night of safety, one night of being treated like they mattered. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight, Sarah was home. Marcus woke before his alarm the way he always did when Emma had school. Pale morning light filtered through his bedroom curtains, and he could hear the familiar sounds of the neighborhood coming to life. Snowplows scraping against asphalt. Car engines struggling to turn over in the cold. The blizzard had passed. Leaving behind a transformed world blanketed in pristine white, he padded quietly to the kitchen to start coffee, careful not to wake their guest. But when he entered the living room, the sofa bed was empty, the sheets neatly folded and stacked on the cushions. For a moment, panic flashed through him. Had Sarah left in the middle of the night? Had something scared her away? Then he heard soft voices coming from Emma's room. And this is Elephant, Emma was saying. I've had him since I was a baby. He used to be gray, but now he's kind of brown from all the hugs. He's very handsome, Sarah's voice replied. I can tell he's been well loved. Marcus smiled and continued. With his morning routine, starting the coffee maker and checking his phone for any urgent work emails. It was Monday, which meant Emma had school, and he had a client presentation to prepare for. The normalcy of these tasks felt strange after the unusual events of the previous night. Daddy. Emma's voice carried down the hallway. Sarah's awake. Can we make pancakes? Since when do you wake up early enough for pancakes on a school day? Marcus called back. But he was already pulling ingredients from the pantry. Emma appeared in the kitchen doorway, still in her pajamas, but fully alert. Sarah's never had your pancakes, Daddy. We have to show her how good they are. Sarah followed behind Emma, wearing the same clothes from yesterday, but looking more rested than she had the night before. Her hair was damp from washing, and she'd managed to work some life back into her appearance. I told Emma she didn't need to go to any trouble, Sarah said. I can just have coffee and get out of your way. It's nonsense, Marcus said, whisking batter in a large bowl. Emma's right, you can't leave without trying the pancakes. It's practically a house rule. As Marcus cooked, Emma entertained Sarah with a detailed explanation of her morning routine. Sarah listened intently, asking questions about Emma's school schedule, her favorite subjects, her best friends. It was the same focused attention she'd shown the night before, as if she were studying how a normal family functioned. The pancakes were light and fluffy, served with real maple syrup and fresh berries that Marcus had splurged on over the weekend. Sarah took her first bite and closed her eyes, savoring the taste. These are incredible, she said. I can't remember the last time I had a good breakfast this good. Better than restaurant pancakes? Emma asked. Much better, Sarah assured her. These taste like home. The comment seemed to surprise Sarah as much as it did Marcus. She looked down at her plate as if she hadn't meant to reveal something so personal. What time do you need to be at school? She asked Emma, clearly trying to change the subject. 8:15, Emma replied around a mouthful of pancake. But Daddy drops me off early so I can help Mrs. Rodriguez set up the classroom. I'm the official pencil sharpener. That sounds like a very important job, Sarah said seriously. It is. Mrs. Rodriguez says, I'm the best pencil sharpener she's ever had. Marcus watched the interaction with growing fascination. Sarah wasn't just being polite to Emma. She seemed genuinely interested in every detail of his daughter's life. Most adults talk down to children or dismiss their concerns as trivial. But Sarah treated Emma like her thoughts and feelings mattered. I should probably head out after breakfast, Sarah said, addressing Marcus. I've imposed on your hospitality long enough. Where will you go? Emma asked, with typical 8-year-old directness. Sarah hesitated. I'll figure something out. I always do. But what if it snows again? What if you get cold? Emma Marcus said gently. Sometimes adults have to make difficult decisions. But Emma wasn't deterred. You could stay here. We have lots of room. I can't stay here forever, sweetheart, Sarah said softly. You and your daddy have your own lives to live. But we like having you here, Emma protested. Don't we, Daddy? Marcus found himself in an impossible position. He did like having Sarah there. She brought a different energy to their morning routine, a sense of expanded possibility. But he also knew that whatever Sarah was running from, it wasn't something that could be solved by hiding out in there. Apartment indefinitely. Sarah's welcome to stay as long as she needs to, he said carefully. But that's her decision to make. Sarah looked between father and daughter, clearly torn. I don't want to complicate your lives. How would you complicate them? Emma asked. It was a fair question, and Sarah seemed unable to answer it. Marcus wondered if she was so used to being seen as a burden that she couldn't imagine someone genuinely wanting her around.
Tell you what, Marcus said, making a decision that surprised.
Even him. Why don't you stay until you figure out your next move? I could use help with some of my design projects. I'm behind on a few deadlines. It would be nice to have someone to bounce ideas off of. Sarah stared at him. You don't know anything about my work experience? I know you're intelligent. I know you pay attention to details. That's more than most people bring to the table. See, Emma said triumphantly. It's perfect. You can help. Daddy with work, and I can show you all my favorite places in the neighborhood. Sarah looked overwhelmed by their enthusiasm. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Emma urged. Please, I don't have anywhere else to be right now, Sarah admitted. Quietly, and I'd like to help, if I can. Then it's settled, Marcus said, feeling a warmth in his chest that had nothing to do with the hot coffee. You can stay in the guest room. You don't have a guest room, Emma pointed out. The living room is now officially the guest room, Marcus declared, which sent Emma into giggles. After breakfast, Marcus walked Emma to school, while Sarah insisted on staying behind to clean the kitchen. The walk was only 4 blocks, but Emma used every step to pepper him with questions about their house guest. Do you think Sarah has a family somewhere? Emma asked as they navigated the snow-covered sidewalks. I don't know, sweetheart. She hasn't mentioned anyone. That's sad. Everyone should have a family. Sometimes people's families aren't very nice to them, Marcus explained gently. Sometimes they have to find new families. Emma considered this with her usual seriousness. Like how we're a family even though it's just you and me? Exactly like that. So maybe Sarah could be part of our family now? Marcus's heart squeezed at the innocent hope in his daughter's voice. Maybe. But we can't push her, okay? She needs to decide for herself what she wants. I think she wants to stay, Emma said confidently. She gets a happy look when she's with us. At the school, Emma hugged Marcus goodbye and ran toward the building, her backpack bouncing with each step. Marcus watched until she disappeared inside, then turned to walk home, his mind racing with the implications of what he'd just committed to. He was letting a stranger stay in his home. Someone whose last name he didn't even know. Someone who clearly had secrets she wasn't ready to share. It went against every practical instinct he'd developed as a single father responsible for Emma's safety and well-being. But there was something about Sarah that made him want to take the risk. Maybe it was the way she'd wrapped Emma's blanket around herself like armor, or the genuine tears in her eyes when Emma had offered her pretzels. Maybe it was the careful way she spoke about her past, like someone who had learned to guard her words. Or maybe it was simply that she seemed as lost as he had felt 3 years ago. And he remembered how desperately he'd needed someone to believe in him during that time. When Marcus returned to the apartment, he found Sarah washing dishes at the kitchen sink. She'd already cleaned the entire kitchen, wiping down counters and organizing the scattered breakfast items. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I wanted to," Sarah replied. "It's the least I can do, Sarah, about what I said. Earlier, the offer to stay, to help with work, I meant it. But I don't want you to feel obligated." Sarah turned to face him, drying her hands on a dish towel. "Why are you doing this? Really?" Marcus leaned against the counter, considering the question. 3 years ago, when Emma's mother left, I was drowning, had no idea how to be a single parent, how to manage work and childcare, how to explain to a 5-year-old why her mom wasn't coming home. I made a lot of mistakes, said the wrong things, fell apart more times than I care to remember. He paused, remembering those dark early months. But people helped me. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, watched Emma when I had to work late. Emma's teacher spent extra time helping her adjust. The guy at the grocery store always made sure to pack our bags so Emma could carry one and feel helpful. Small kindnesses, but they made all the difference. Sarah listened intently, her green eyes focused on his face. "I guess I learned that sometimes. The most important thing you can do is just show up for someone when they need it," Marcus continued. "Emma and I have a good life now, but we didn't get here alone. It's when I see someone who might need what we needed back then." "You pay it forward," Sarah finished softly. "Something like that." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this. "What if I'm not who you think I am? What if you are exactly who I think you are, and who do you think I am?" Marcus studied her face, taking in the intelligence in her eyes, the careful way she held herself, the unconscious elegance that no amount of worn clothing could hide. "I think you're someone who's been through something terrible and is trying to figure out how to rebuild," said honestly. "I think you're probably much stronger than you realize. I think you're exactly the kind of person I'd want Emma to learn from." Sarah's composure cracked slightly. "You barely know me. I know you gave up your own comfort to wrap Emma's blanket around yourself instead of just taking it. I know you listened to every word she said like it was the most important thing in the world. I know you tried to leave this morning because you were worried about imposing on us, not because you didn't want to stay. Those could all be manipulations, ways to gain your trust." "Could be," Marcus agreed, "but I don't think they are. And besides, everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt sometimes." Sarah turned back to the sink, ostensibly to finish the last few dishes, but Marcus could see her shoulders shaking slightly. "I haven't had anyone believe in me for a very long time," she said quietly. "Well, now you do." Marcus showed Sarah around his home office, converted closet space where he kept his computer, design equipment, and client files. It was cramped, but functional, with a window that looked out onto the snow-covered courtyard behind their building. "What kind of design work do you do?" Sarah asked, examining his portfolio samples pinned to a corkboard. "Mostly small business stuff. Logos, brochures, websites. Nothing glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me work from home." Sarah studied his work with professional interest, and Marcus was struck again by how she seemed to know more than she was letting on. The way she examined his designs, the questions she asked about client relationships and project timelines, it all suggested someone with business experience. "This is really good work," she said, pointing to a restaurant logo he'd designed. "Clean, memorable, perfectly suited to the target demographic." "Thanks. That one took me forever to get right." The client kept changing their mind about what they wanted. "Scope creep," Sarah said automatically, then looked surprised at her own words. "Exactly. You sound like you know something about project management." Sarah hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. "I used to work in corporate consulting, strategic planning mostly. I'm familiar with the challenges of managing client expectations." It was the first concrete detail she'd shared about her professional background, and Marcus filed it away with interest. Corporate consulting explained a lot. The way she carried herself, her obvious intelligence, the expensive clothes that had seen better days. "What happened to that career?" he asked gently. Sarah's expression closed off again. "It's complicated." Marcus didn't push. but he made a mental note to be more observant. Whatever had happened to Sarah's consulting career, it was clearly connected to whatever had brought her to that laundromat the night before. They spent the morning working together on a logo design for a local bakery. Sarah proved to be exactly what Marcus had hoped: intelligent, creative, and able to offer valuable insights about branding and marketing strategy. She approached the project with professional focus, asking thoughtful questions about the clients, goals, and target audience. "What if we incorporated the rolling pin into the letter form?" Sarah suggested, sketching rough ideas on a notepad. "Make it part of the B in bakery." "That's brilliant," Marcus said, immediately seeing the potential. Simple, but memorable. As they worked, Sarah seemed to come alive in a way Marcus hadn't seen before. The careful guardedness remained, but underneath it was a sharp, creative mind that clearly thrived on problem-solving. Whatever had happened to derail her career, it hadn't diminished her professional skills. "You're really good at this," Marcus said as they refined the design. "Have you considered freelancing?" "There's always more work than I can handle." Sarah looked up from her sketching. "I don't exactly have a stable living situation at the moment." "You do now, if you want it." The offer hung between them, more significant than Marcus had initially intended. He was essentially offering Sarah not just a place to stay, but a chance to rebuild her professional life. "I don't understand why you're doing this," Sarah said quietly. "What's in it for you?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Honestly, I'm lonely. Not romantically," he added quickly, "but intellectually. Yes. I spend most of my time either working alone or talking to an 8-year-old. Around who understands business, who can contribute ideas and challenge my thinking that's valuable to me. And Emma. How do you know I'm safe to have around your daughter? Because Emma likes you, and Emma is an excellent judge of character. Because you treat her with respect and genuine interest. Because you're sitting here asking me these questions instead of just taking advantage of the situation." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, staring at the logo sketches scattered across Marcus's desk. "I ran away from my life," she said finally. "Everything I built, everything I worked for, I walked away from all of it. I'm not sure I'm ready to start building again." "Maybe that's exactly why you should," Marcus replied. "Sometimes the best foundations are laid after everything else has been cleared away." When Emma came home from school that afternoon, she found Marcus and Sarah deep in conversation about color palettes and font choices. She dumped her backpack by the door and climbed into the chair next to Sarah. "What are you making?" she asked, examining their work. "A logo for a bakery," Sarah explained. "Your dad and I are trying to decide between blue and green for the accent color." "Purple," Emma said immediately. "Purple is the best color for bakeries because it makes people think of birthday cakes." Marcus and Sarah exchanged glances, then looked back at Emma's suggestion. She was right, purple would be unexpected, but perfectly suited to the warm, celebratory atmosphere they were trying to create. "Emma," Marcus said solemnly, "you might be a design genius." Emma beamed with pride. "Does this mean I can help with all your work now?" "We'll see," Marcus laughed. "But you definitely earned a spot on the creative team today," as they worked together on the final version of the logo. Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in years: the satisfaction of true collaboration. Not just professional collaboration, but the deeper kind that comes from 3 people working toward a common goal, each contributing their unique strengths. Sarah brought technical expertise and strategic thinking. Marcus provided design skills and client knowledge. Emma contributed fresh perspective and an uncanny ability to cut through complexity to the heart of what mattered. It felt, Marcus realized, like a family. Not the traditional kind he'd once expected to have, but something new and unexpected, and possibly even better. The question now was whether Sarah would stay long enough to let them all figure out what that might mean. 2 weeks passed like pages turning in a book. Marcus never wanted to end. Sarah had settled into their lives with an ease that surprised all of them, but none more than Sarah herself. She'd taken over the guest room permanently, contributing to household expenses with money she claimed came from freelance work she did online. Marcus didn't question the source too deeply. Everyone deserved their privacy, and Sarah was clearly carrying secrets she wasn't ready to share. What mattered was that she was there, and their small family had expanded in ways Marcus hadn't thought possible. Sarah proved to be an invaluable business partner, her strategic mind complementing his creative skills perfectly. Aid completed 3 major projects together, earning more in 2 weeks than Marcus typically made in a month. More importantly, Sarah seemed to be rediscovering parts of herself that had been buried under whatever trauma had brought her to that laundromat. But it was her relationship with Emma that truly amazed Marcus. Sarah approached his daughter with a combination of genuine respect and protective tenderness that spoke to something deeper than simple kindness. She helped with homework without taking over, listened to Emma's problems without dismissing them, and somehow always knew exactly what to say when Emma needed encouragement. On this particular Thursday evening, Marcus was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he heard Emma's frustrated voice from the living room. "I don't understand why Mrs. Rodriguez assigned this stupid family tree project," Emma was saying. "What am I supposed to put? Mom? Unknown location?" Marcus felt his chest tighten. The family tree assignment came up every year in elementary school, and it never got easier. He started to move toward the living room to help Emma navigate the sensitive topic, but Sarah's voice stopped him. "Family trees don't have to look like everyone else's," Sarah said gently. "They just have to be true to your family." "But my family is weird," Emma replied. "It's just me and Daddy. That's not weird. It's special. Some families are built by genetics, and some are built by choice and love. Both kinds are equally real." Marcus leaned against the kitchen doorway, listening. "But what about my mom?" "What? I can't just pretend she doesn't exist." "You don't have to pretend anything," Sarah said. "You can include her if you want to. She's part of your story, even if she's not part of your everyday life. But you can also focus on the family that's here with you now." Emma was quiet for a moment. "What would you put on your family tree?" The question hung in the air, and Marcus held his breath. Sarah rarely talked about her past, and Emma's innocent curiosity had a way of getting people to reveal more than they intended. "That's complicated," Sarah said finally. "I come from what most people would call a successful family. Lots of money, big houses, important jobs. But success doesn't always equal happiness, and it definitely doesn't equal love." "Were they mean to you?" "Not mean exactly, just absent. They were too busy building their careers and their wealth to pay much attention to building relationships." Marcus could hear the pain in Sarah's voice, carefully controlled but unmistakably there. "That sounds lonely," Emma said with the straightforward empathy that made Marcus so proud of her. "It was very lonely," Sarah agreed, "which is why being here with you and your dad means so much to me. You've shown me what a real family looks like." "You're part of our family now," Emma said matter-of-factly, "so you can be on my family tree too." Marcus heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I would be honored to be on your family tree, Emma." Marcus quietly returned to his dinner preparations, his heart full. Emma had just offered Sarah something precious: inclusion, belonging, the recognition that family was about more than blood relations. And Sarah had accepted it with the kind of gratitude that spoke to years of exclusion and isolation. Later that evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Marcus found Sarah sitting on the apartment's small balcony, despite the November chill. It was wrapped in one of his sweatshirts, staring out at the city lights with a contemplative expression. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, stepping outside with 2 cups of tea. "Thanks," Sarah said, accepting the warm mug gratefully. "I needed some air. The family tree conversation got to you." Emma has a way of asking exactly the right questions to make you think about things you'd rather avoid. Marcus settled into the other chair, pulling his jacket tighter against the cold. "Want to talk about it?" Sarah was quiet for so long that Marcus thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I grew up in a mansion with 12 bedrooms and never felt at home. My parents loved me, I think, but they loved their work more. Success was the family religion, and anything that didn't contribute to building wealth or status was considered a waste of time." She paused, taking a sip of tea. "I followed their path exactly. Graduated top of my class, went to the best business school, built a consulting firm that made millions, had everything they taught me to want. But not what you actually wanted," Marcus guessed. I didn't even know what I actually wanted. I never had time to figure it out. Work was everything. 18-hour days, constant travel, relationships that were really just networking opportunities. Marcus waited, sensing there was more. 3 months ago, I was sitting in a boardroom in Manhattan, listening to my business partner explain why we needed to lay off 40% of our staff to increase profit margins. These were people I'd worked with for years, people with families and mortgages and dreams. And I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd become exactly like my parents, successful, wealthy, and completely disconnected from anything that actually mattered. Sarah's hands were shaking slightly around her tea mug, and Marcus resisted the urge to reach over and steady them. So what did you do? I walked out, middle of the meeting, middle of the biggest deal of our career. I just stood up and left. Went home, packed a single suitcase, and disappeared. You left everything? Everything. The company, the penthouse apartment, the bank accounts, the investments, all of it. I couldn't stand to touch any of it anymore. Marcus stared at her. Sarah, how much money are we talking about? Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it, enough to never work again, enough to buy this entire building without noticing the expense, enough to make your financial worries disappear forever. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. Sarah wasn't just homeless by circumstance, she was a billionaire who had chosen to walk away from her fortune. The expensive clothes, the business acumen, the way she sometimes looked around his modest apartment like she was seeing another world. It all made sense now. Why are you telling me this? He asked. Because I need you to understand what you're risking by letting me stay here. My business partner, Richard Blackstone, isn't the kind of man who just lets people walk away from billion-dollar companies. He's been looking for me since I disappeared, and he's not looking because he misses. My sparkling personality? Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November air. What does he want? Control of the company. My shares, my client relationships, my proprietary algorithms. If he can have me declared mentally incompetent or missing under suspicious circumstances, he can seize everything I built. And if he finds you here. Sarah's expression darkened. Then he'll find out about you and Emma. And Richard has never hesitated to use leverage against people when he wants something. Marcus set down his teacup, his mind racing. The woman he'd invited into his home, the woman his daughter was growing to love, wasn't just running from a difficult past. She was running from someone dangerous. Someone with unlimited resources and apparently no scruples about how he used them. You should have told me sooner, he said. I know. I kept telling myself I'd only stay for a few days, that it wouldn't matter. But then Emma started calling me. Family, and you started trusting me with your business, and I realized I was being selfish. I was putting you both at risk because I didn't want to be alone anymore. Marcus studied Sarah's profile in the dim light from the apartment. She looked exhausted, not physically but emotionally, like someone who had been carrying an impossible weight for too long. What's your real name? He asked quietly. Sarah. Elizabeth Whitmore, CEO and co-founder of Whitmore Strategic Solutions. Name meant nothing to Marcus, but he could hear the weight of it in Sarah's voice. This wasn't just a business identity. It was who she had been for her entire adult life. And you walked away from all of it for what? To prove a point? To save my soul, Sarah said simply. I was turning into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who could look at 40 families losing their livelihoods and see only improved profit margins. I couldn't live with that person anymore. So you became homeless instead. I became free. For the first time in my life, I was making decisions based on what felt right instead of what would make money. It was terrifying and liberating and completely addictive. Marcus understood the appeal, but he also understood the reality of their situation. Sarah, you can't run forever. You can't keep putting Emma and me in danger. I know, she said. Miserably, I should leave. I should have left weeks ago. That's not what I'm saying. Sarah looked at him in surprise. What are you saying? Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was about to suggest something that would change all their lives. I'm saying maybe it's time to stop running and start fighting back. Richard has teams of lawyers, unlimited resources, connections in every industry. What could we possibly do against that? We could be smarter than him, Marcus said. built a billion-dollar company from nothing that takes intelligence, creativity, and strategic thinking. Those skills don't disappear just because you walked away from the money. You don't understand what you're up against. Then help me understand, but don't just give up and disappear again. Emma needs you, and honestly, so do I, not because of your money, but because of who you are. The person sitting on this balcony right now, that's who we care about. Sarah was quiet for a long time, and Marcus could see her weighing options, calculating risks, trying to find a path forward that didn't end in disaster for everyone she'd come to care about. "If we do this," she said finally, "if we try to fight. Richard, there's no guarantee we'll win. It's ruthless, and he has every advantage. Except one," Marcus said. "What's that? He doesn't know what real family looks like? He doesn't understand what people will do to protect the people they love." Sarah turned to look at him directly. "Are you saying you love me?" The question caught Marcus off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because he realized he didn't know the answer. What he felt for Sarah was complicated attraction. Yes, but also protectiveness, partnership, and something deeper that he wasn't ready to name. "Saying I care about you," he said carefully. "Emma cares about you, and we're not going to let some corporate bully destroy what we've built here just because he's mad that you chose people over profit. It won't be easy. The best things never are." Sarah stood up and moved to the balcony railing. Looking out over the city where she'd once commanded million-dollar deals from glass towers, now she was planning to fight for something much smaller, but infinitely more valuable to right. To choose her own family, her own values, her own definition of success. "I'll need to access some of my resources," she said slowly, her strategic mind already working. Bank accounts, legal documents, evidence of Richard's business practices. I've been avoiding all of that because I was afraid it would lead him. To me, maybe it's time to stop being afraid and start being angry. Sarah smiled for the first time since their conversation began. "You know what? You're right. I spent 3 months running away from the fight. Maybe it's time to bring the fight to him." "Emma's going to love this," Marcus said. "She's always wanted to be part of a real adventure. This isn't a game, Marcus. Richard'll come after us with everything he has, and we'd better make sure we're ready for him." As they headed back inside, Marcus felt a familiar flutter of fear mixed with anticipation. 3 years ago, his life had been turned upside down by circumstances beyond his control. Now he was choosing to turn it upside down again, but this time he wasn't facing the challenge alone. This time, he had Sarah's intelligence and Emma's unwavering belief that everything would work out okay. This time, he had something worth fighting for, beyond just survival. This time, he might actually win. But first they had to figure out exactly what winning would look like, and how 3 people with limited resources could take on a man who had spent his career destroying anyone who stood in his way. The next morning would bring new challenges. But tonight, for the first time since Sarah had told him the truth, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. Hope. Because sometimes the best strategies come from the most unexpected places. And sometimes the most powerful weapon against greed and corruption is simply the refusal to let it. When Sarah Elizabeth Whitmore had run away from her billions to find her humanity, it was time to use both to build something that mattered. War for Sarah's freedom was about to begin, and Marcus intended to make sure she didn't fight it alone. The plan began taking shape over Emma's Saturday morning cereal. While his daughter carefully sorted her lucky charms by color, a ritual she claimed brought good luck for the weekend. Marcus and Sarah huddled over his laptop at the kitchen table, mapping out what Sarah called the most important strategic campaign of my life. "First step is evidence gathering," Sarah explained, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she accessed secure servers through encrypted connections. "Richard's been cooking the books for years, but he's always been careful to keep the illegal stuff separate from the company's official records." "How do you know about it if it's separate?" Marcus asked, refilling their coffee cups. "Because I helped design the system," Sarah said grimly, "back when I thought creative accounting was just good business practice. I have copies of everything, stored in a private server that Richard doesn't know about." Emma looked up from her cereal sorting. "Are you fighting bad guys now?" "Not something like that, sweetheart," Marcus said. Sarah's old business partner wasn't very nice to the people who worked for them. Like a bully?
Exactly.
Exactly like a bully, Sarah confirmed. And what do we do with bullies? Straightened up with the confidence of someone who had dealt with her share of playground politics, we stand up to them. Mrs. Rodriguez says bullies only win when good people don't fight back. Mrs. Rodriguez is a very smart teacher, Sarah said, exchanging a meaningful look with Marcus. As Sarah worked, Marcus found himself marveling at the transformation taking place before his eyes. Gone was the lost, frightened woman he'd found, shivering outside the laundromat. In her place sat a brilliant strategist, her mind sharp as a blade as she navigated complex financial systems and legal documents with the ease of someone who had built an empire from scratch. Here, Sarah said, turning the laptop screen toward Marcus. Look at this. The screen showed a series of bank transfers. Millions of dollars moving between accounts in patterns that even Marcus's untrained eye could see were suspicious. Richard's been siphoning money from client accounts to fund his personal investments, Sarah explained. The returns go back to cover the withdrawals, so the clients never know their money was borrowed without permission. It's technically legal, as long as you disclose it, but he didn't disclose it, Marcus finished. Not once, and some of these investments were incredibly risky. If they'd gone bad, our clients would have lost everything while Richard walked away with the profits. Emma had abandoned her cereal and climbed into Sarah's lap to get a better look at the screen. Why are there so many numbers? Because bad. Guys like to hide their bad behavior behind complicated math, Sarah said, wrapping her arms around Emma. They make it so confusing that most people give up trying to understand it. But you understand it, Emma said confidently. I helped create it, which means I know exactly how to tear it apart. The next several hours passed in a blur of technical work that made Marcus's head spin. Sarah accessed files, cross-referenced transactions, and built what she called an irrefutable case for securities fraud. She worked with the intense focus of someone who had found their purpose again, pausing only to answer Emma's questions or accept the snacks Marcus brought her by mid-afternoon. They had assembled a comprehensive dossier that documented years of financial impropriety. But Sarah's expression grew more troubled as the evidence mounted. This is worse than I thought, she said, rubbing her eyes.
Richard hasn't just been stealing from clients. He's been using company resources to discredit business rivals, manipulate stock prices, even bribe regulatory officials.
We're not just talking about corporate misconduct anymore. This is organized crime. Marcus felt a chill of fear, which means he's even more dangerous than we thought, and more desperate to find me. If this evidence becomes public, Richard doesn't just lose the company, he goes to prison for the rest of his life. Emma, who had been drawing pictures at the kitchen table while the adults worked, looked up with a concerned expression. Are we in trouble? Not trouble exactly, Marcus said carefully, but we need to be very smart about what we do next. Sarah closed the laptop and turned to face them both. I need to be honest with you. What we've found here is enough to destroy Richard, but getting it to the right people without him stopping us won't be easy. He has connections everywhere. Law enforcement, media, government agencies. If we try to go through normal channels, he'll know about it before we even submit the evidence. So what do we do? Marcus asked. We get creative, Sarah said, a spark of her old competitive fire flickering in her eyes. Richard's expecting me to either stay hidden forever or come crawling back, asking for forgiveness. He's not expecting me to wage a coordinated public relations war designed to destroy his reputation and his freedom simultaneously. Emma perked up at this. Like when Jessica Miller was being mean to everyone at recess, so we all decided to just ignore her until she stopped? Exactly like that, Sarah said. Sometimes the best way to fight someone who thinks they're powerful is to take away their audience. The plan Sarah outlined was ambitious and risky. Instead of going to authorities who might be compromised, they would release the evidence directly to the public through multiple channels simultaneously. Financial journalists, social media, regulatory agencies, client companies, everyone would get the information at once, making it impossible for Richard to contain the damage. But first, Sarah said, we need to make sure we're protected. Richard's going to come after us the moment this goes public, and we need to be ready. What kind of protection are we talking about? Marcus asked. Legal, financial, and physical. I still have allies in the industry, people who worked with me before Richard started his campaign to isolate me. They'll help if I ask them to." Emma had been listening intently, and now she raised her hand like she was in school. "Can I help?" Sarah and Marcus exchanged glances. "What did you have in mind, sweetheart?" Marcus asked. "Well, you said the bad guy expects Sarah to be scared and hiding, right? What if she wasn't hiding? What if she was right here, being part of our family, not being scared at all?" Sarah stared at Emma with something approaching. "You want me to come out of hiding completely?" "Bullies like to scare people by making them think they're all alone," Emma said with a tear-rolled wisdom. "But you're not alone. You have us." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride. His daughter had just identified the core weakness in Richard's strategy. He was counting on Sarah's isolation to maintain his advantage. But Sarah wasn't isolated anymore. She had people who cared about her, who would stand with her, who wouldn't be intimidated by corporate threats. "Emma's right," Marcus said slowly. "Richard's whole plan depends on you being alone and vulnerable. But what if you're not? What if you have a family that believes in you? What if you have a business partner who won't be scared off? What if you have a community that sees you as a person worth protecting?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing this shift in perspective. "It's still dangerous," she said finally. "So is letting him win," Marcus replied. That evening, Sarah made her first phone call in 3 months. Marcus and Emma sat on either side of her on the couch as she dialed a number from memory, her hands steady, despite the magnitude of what she was about to do. "Diana, it's Sarah, ... I know it's been months, ... I need your help." Diana Chen had been Sarah's mentor when she first started in corporate consulting, and she'd remained a trusted friend even as their careers took different paths. Now the managing partner at one of New York's most prestigious law firms, Diana had the resources and connections to help Sarah fight back against Richard's campaign. The conversation lasted over an hour, with Diana asking sharp questions about the evidence they'd gathered and the risks they were facing. Finally, she agreed to help. "She's flying out tomorrow," Sarah said after ending the call. "She'll review our evidence and help us coordinate the release strategy. She's also arranging for personal security until this is resolved." "Personal security?" Marcus asked. "Bodyguards," Emma said matter-of-factly. "Like the president has." "Thing like that," Sarah confirmed. "Diana's convinced that Richard will escalate once he realizes I'm not backing down. She wants to make sure we're all protected." The weight of what they were undertaking settled over them like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about exposing financial crimes anymore. It was about taking on a man who had unlimited resources and apparently no moral boundaries. The stakes couldn't be higher. But as Marcus looked around their small living room, at Emma curled up against Sarah's side and Sarah's face set with determined resolve, he felt something he hadn't expected. Excitement. The first time in 3 years, he was part of something bigger than just survival. He was part of a fight that mattered, alongside people who mattered to him. "Phase 1 complete," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what they'd just unleashed. Now we wait for Richard to respond. They didn't have to wait long. At 9:47 a.m., Sarah's personal phone rang with a number she recognized immediately. Richard Blackstone's private line.
"Don't answer it!"
Marcus said instinctively. "Actually, I think I should," Sarah replied, her strategic mind already working. Diana's recording everything, and Richard's angry enough right now to say something incriminating. She answered on speakerphone, making sure the recording app was active. "Hello, Richard." "You vindictive bitch." Richard's voice exploded through the phone, his usual corporate polish completely abandoned. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "I've told the truth about your criminal activities," Sarah replied calmly. "Something I should have done years ago." "This is corporate warfare, Sarah, and you just declared war on someone who will destroy you. I know where you are. I know about your little boyfriend and his precious daughter. You think hiding in some pathetic apartment will protect you?" Marcus felt his blood run cold. Emma, who had been coloring at the kitchen table, looked up with worry in her eyes. "Are you threatening my family, Richard?" Sarah asked, her voice dangerously quiet. "I'm stating facts. Marcus Thompson, graphic designer, lives at 847 Maple Street. Apartment to be his daughter Emma attends Lincoln Elementary. He's behind on his Rent has a 2018 Honda Civic with a broken air conditioner and earns approximately $42,000 a year from freelance work. The casual recitation of their personal details was more chilling than any direct threat. Richard had been watching them, gathering information, preparing for exactly this moment. Very thorough research, Sarah said, though Marcus could see her. Hands shaking. Fortunately for you, it's all been recorded and will be added to the evidence file documenting your criminal harassment. Evidence. You think anyone will believe a mentally unstable woman who abandoned her responsibilities and disappeared for 3 months? I have psychiatrists who will testify that you suffered a complete psychological breakdown. I have witnesses who will confirm your erratic behavior. By the time I'm done with you, no one will believe a word you say. Actually, Diana's voice came through another phone as she joined the call. This is Diana Chen, Ms. Whitmore's attorney. Mr. Blackstone, you should know that this conversation is being recorded and that you've just committed several federal crimes, including witness intimidation and criminal threatening. The line went silent for a moment. Marcus could practically hear Richard's wheels turning as he realized he'd been trapped. This isn't over, Richard said finally, his voice now cold and controlled. You have no idea what you're dealing with. The contrary, Diana replied. We know exactly what we're dealing with. A criminal who's about to face the consequences of his actions. The line went dead, and the apartment fell into tense silence. Well, Sarah said finally, that went better than expected. He's angry enough to make mistakes, and we got him threatening us on record. He knows where we live, Marcus said, his protective instincts in overdrive. He knows about Emma's school, which is why I've already arranged for security, Diana's. A voice came through the phone. There's a team outside your building right now, and another team at Emma's school. Richard may be dangerous, but he's not stupid enough to try anything with witnesses around. Emma had been listening to all of this with the intense focus she brought to important adult conversations. Now she looked up at them with a determined expression. Is the bad guy going to try to hurt us? Marcus knelt down beside her chair. Might try to scare us, but he can't actually hurt us. There are people protecting us, and we're going to be very careful. Good, Emma said firmly, because I'm not scared of bullies, and neither should Sarah be. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity. Phone calls from reporters, updates from Diana's legal team. It's a constant stream of news coverage as the story gained momentum. By noon, 3 different regulatory agencies had announced investigations into Whitmore Strategic Solutions, and the company's stock price had dropped by 40%. Sarah monitored it all with the focused intensity of a general commanding a battle. She fielded interview requests, coordinated with law enforcement, and provided additional evidence as investigators requested it. Marcus had never seen her more in her element. Her brilliant strategic mind finally turned toward something that mattered, but it was the personal costs that worried him. Every news report mentioned Sarah by name, analyzing her background, speculating about her motives, debating her credibility. The woman who had spent 3 months in complete anonymity was now the center of a media firestorm. How are you handling all this attention? Marcus asked during a brief lull in the chaos. Better than I expected, Sarah replied, though he could see the strain in her eyes. I spent so many years trying to control my public image, managing every media appearance, crafting every statement to present exactly the right impression. This is different. It's just the truth, and the truth doesn't need to be managed. Emma had spent the day at school under discreet security protection, and when Marcus picked her up, she was bursting with excitement. Daddy? Mrs. Rodriguez said. She saw Sarah on the news. She said Sarah's helping catch bad guys who steal money. That's right, sweetheart. Sarah's being very brave. I told Jessica Miller that my family is famous now, Emma continued proudly. She was very impressed. Marcus could only imagine the conversations happening among the other parents at Emma's school. By tomorrow, everyone would know that the mysterious woman living with Marcus Thompson was actually a billionaire. Whistleblower taking on corporate corruption. Their quiet life was about to become very public. When they returned to the apartment, they found Sarah on the phone with someone from the FBI's white-collar crime division. She was walking them through financial records, explaining the sophisticated methods Richard had used to hide his criminal activities. The beauty of his system was its complexity, Sarah was saying. Most auditors would look at the surface layer and see legitimate transactions. You had to understand the underlying algorithms to see how money was being diverted. Emma settled at the kitchen table with her homework while Marcus started dinner. Listening to Sarah dismantle the empire she'd helped build, there was something both fascinating and heartbreaking about watching her use her intimate knowledge of the company to expose its corruption. Diana called with updates throughout the evening. The FBI had executed search warrants on Richard's offices and homes. The SEC had frozen several suspicious accounts. Multiple clients were filing lawsuits demanding audits of their accounts. The carefully constructed criminal enterprise was collapsing faster than anyone had anticipated. Richard's lawyers are already reaching out about plea negotiations, Diana reported.
They know the evidence is overwhelming.
And they're trying to minimize his exposure.
What kind of deal are they looking for? Sarah asked. Full cooperation. In exchange for reduced charges, he's willing to testify against other people involved in the scheme if it means avoiding life in prison. Sarah was quiet for a moment, processing this development. He's going to try to make me the scapegoat, isn't he? Claim I was the mastermind and he was just following my lead? Probably, Diana agreed. But we have years of documentation proving that you tried to stop the illegal activities, that you raised concerns about client safety, that you ultimately walked away rather than participate. His credibility is shot, and yours is growing stronger by the hour. As evening turned to night, the initial adrenaline rush began to fade, replaced by exhaustion and the sobering realization of what they'd accomplished. Down, one of the most powerful men in corporate consulting, exposed a criminal conspiracy that had stolen millions of dollars and potentially saved dozens of companies from financial ruin. But they'd also made themselves targets of Richard's desperation and rage. The security team outside was a constant reminder that the danger wasn't over in some ways. It was just beginning. I'm proud of what we did today, Sarah said as they tucked Emma into bed. But I'm sorry I brought this chaos into your lives. Didn't bring chaos, Emma said sleepily. You brought adventure. And besides, the good guys won today, didn't they? The good guys definitely won today, Sarah confirmed. After Emma fell asleep, Marcus and Sarah sat on the couch, finally allowing themselves to process the emotional weight of the day's events. What happens now? Marcus asked. Now we testify. We help put Richard in prison, and we figure out what comes next, Sarah replied. The company will probably be dissolved. The assets will be used to compensate victims, and I'll need to decide what I want to do with the rest of my life. Any ideas? Sarah smiled, the first genuinely relaxed expression Marcus had seen from her all day. Actually, yes. I was thinking about starting a small consulting firm, something focused on helping family businesses grow ethically, sustainably. Maybe partnering with a talented graphic designer who understands the importance of building something real. Marcus felt his heart lift. That sounds like a perfect plan. There's just one problem, Sarah said, her expression turning serious. I'm still technically worth several $1 billion. Even after the legal fees and victim compensation, I'll have more money than we could spend in 10 lifetimes. That changes things, doesn't it? Marcus considered the question carefully. The money did change things. It opened possibilities he'd never imagined, eliminated financial worries that had dominated his life for years. But it also raised questions about identity, equality, and what their relationship meant when the balance of power was so skewed. It changes the practical things, he said finally, but it doesn't change what matters. Emma still needs a father who puts her first. You still need people who see you for who you are, not what you're worth. I still need a partner who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be. And we still need each other, Sarah added softly. Especially that, as they sat together in the quiet apartment. Watching the city lights twinkle beyond their windows, Marcus felt a profound sense of completion. 3 months ago, Sarah had lost everything that she thought defined her. Tonight, she'd gained something infinitely more valuable, a family that loved her not, despite her flaws and complications, but because of them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they navigated the legal proceedings and media attention. But tonight, they were simply 3 people who had found each other against impossible odds and chosen to build something beautiful together. The war with Richard Blackstone was effectively over. The war for their future was just beginning, and Marcus couldn't wait to see what they'd build next. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the lobby of a gleaming office building in downtown Chicago, watching Emma practice her presentation one more time. She held a small stack of index cards and spoke with the confident poise of someone who had inherited both her father's creativity and Sarah's strategic mind. And in conclusion, Emma said, addressing an imaginary audience, our new company will help families build businesses that make people happy instead of just making money. Thank you for your attention. Perfect, Sarah said, emerging from the elevator bank with 3 cups of hot chocolate from the coffee shop downstairs. You're going to be the best chief happiness officer this company has ever had. Emma beamed at the title they'd created especially for her. Do I really get my own business cards? With your name and everything, Marcus confirmed, accepting his hot chocolate gratefully. The November weather had turned sharp and cold, but inside their new office building, everything felt warm and full of possibility. The past 6 months had transformed their lives in ways none of them could have predicted. Richard Blackstone was serving a 15-year federal sentence after his cooperation deal fell apart when investigators discovered even more evidence of criminal activity. The dissolution of Whitmore Strategic Solutions had resulted in over $800 million being returned to defrauded clients, with Sarah personally contributing an additional $200 million from her private accounts to ensure full restitution. But more importantly, they'd learned how to be a family in the spotlight. The media attention had been intense at first, with reporters camping outside their apartment and photographers following Emma to school. Sarah had handled it with surprising grace, giving carefully crafted interviews that focused on corporate accountability rather than personal drama. Emma had declared the whole thing more exciting than being on TV, and had charmed every journalist who met her. Marcus had worried about the impact on Emma's normal childhood, but his daughter had adapted with typical resilience. She'd made friends with the security team, learned to ignore cameras, and developed an impressive ability to deflect intrusive questions with polite but firm responses she'd learned from watching Sarah. The biggest adjustment had been financial. Sarah's legal victory had restored her access to her frozen assets, making her officially one of the wealthiest women in America. She'd immediately set up trusts to ensure Emma's future education and security, paid off Marcus's debts, and purchased the Victorian house where they'd been renting their apartment, converting it into a comfortable home for their unconventional family. But wealth, they'd discovered, was less about buying things and more about buying freedom. Freedom from financial stress, freedom to choose work that mattered, freedom to take risks and pursue dreams without worrying about survival, which brought them to today's milestone, the official launch of Thomson Whitmore Consulting.
Their joint
venture focused on helping small businesses grow ethically and sustainably. Their first office was modest but perfect. 3 rooms on the 15th floor with windows overlooking the lake. Space for Marcus's design, equipment, and Sarah's strategic planning sessions. In a small conference room where Emma could do homework and offer her unique perspective on what made businesses good or bad. Are you nervous? Sarah asked Marcus as they rode the elevator up to their floor. Terrified, Marcus admitted. 6 months ago, I was a struggling freelancer. I'm co-founding a consulting firm with one of the most famous whistleblowers in corporate history. 6 months ago, I was hiding in a laundromat, Sarah pointed out. Now I'm starting over with the 2 best partners I could ask for. Emma looked up from reviewing her presentation notes. Are you both forgetting that we're really good at this? We caught the bad guy. We helped all those people get their money back, and we became a family. Starting a business should be easy, compared to all that. Her confidence was infectious, and Marcus felt his nervousness transform into excitement. Emma was right. They'd already accomplished the impossible. Everything else was just details. Their first client meeting was scheduled for 10 a.m. Catherine Morrison owned a small chain of bakeries and wanted to expand without losing the personal touch that made her business special. It was exactly the kind of challenge that played to all their strengths: Marcus's design skills, Sarah's strategic expertise, and Emma's insight into what made places feel welcoming. Mrs. Morrison, Emma said brightly as their client arrived, we're so excited to help make your bakeries even more amazing. Catherine Morrison was a woman in her 50s with flour permanently embedded under her fingernails and laugh lines that spoke of years spent making people happy with baked goods. She looked around their new office with obvious approval. "This is lovely," she said. "And Emma, I have to say, your father and Sarah have told me so much about your ideas for making businesses better for families." Emma straightened up with pride. "Well, families are the most important thing, so businesses should help families, not hurt them." For the next 2 hours, they worked together to develop a growth strategy for Morrison's bakeries that honored Catherine's values while positioning her for sustainable expansion. Sarah analyzed market opportunities and competitive landscapes. Marcus designed concepts for new store layouts and branding elements. Emma asked the kinds of questions that got to the heart of what customers really wanted. "What if people could have birthday parties at your bakeries?" Emma suggested during a brainstorming session. "Like really good parties with decorating stations and everything?" Catherine's eyes lit up. "It's brilliant. We have the space. We have the expertise. And it would build exactly the kind of community connections I want." "These are really good," Emma announced after tasting a chocolate cupcake with rainbow sprinkles. "Mrs. Morrison is going to be very successful." "Thanks to your birthday party idea," Sarah said.
It's thanks to all of us working together, Emma corrected.
"That's how the best things happen, when people help each other." As they shared cupcakes and talked about their plans for the business, Marcus felt a profound sense of contentment settle over him. This wasn't the life he'd planned or expected, but it was better than anything he could have imagined. They were no longer just three people who had found each other during a storm. They were a family, a business partnership, and a testament to the power of choosing love over fear, purpose over profit, and each other over everything else. The future stretched ahead of them, full of possibilities and challenges and adventures they couldn't yet imagine. But whatever came next, they would face it together as a family that had been built not by circumstance or convention, but by the conscious choice to create something beautiful from the pieces of their individual stories. Outside, snow began to fall again, just like it had on the night they first met. But this time, none of them were seeking shelter from the storm. This time, they were the shelter. For each other, and for anyone else who might need a place to belong, in that. Marcus thought, as he watched his daughter share her cupcake with the woman who had become their everything. It's the best ending to any story he could imagine. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.